I've never met an ADHD woman who doesn't know how to eat well and how to look after herself, but it's just too much. We don't have these hormones here to help us go, right, this is how I need to increase my capacity, my mental capacity right now, so I can actually do the stuff I know I should be doing for myself.
You are tuned into the Dr. Tyna Show with Dr. Tyna Moore. For more, visit drtyna.com. On this episode of the Dr. Tyna Show, I'm sitting down with Adele Winslett. Adele is a women's health practitioner based out of the UK. I found her a few years ago on my friend Nicole Jardim's Period Party podcast, and she was talking about the intersection of midlife, ADHD, and neurodivergence, and it really struck me because as somebody who's always been a little bit quirky, who definitely has been diagnosed as hyperkinetic as a young child, I felt the ADHD hammer come down in middle age. And I don't know how else to describe it. It's always been a superpower of mine to be able to go in 8 different directions at once. And while I've never formally been diagnosed, I definitely have some propensity towards it. And as the estrogen drops out in midlife, the ADHD seems to roar its ugly head. It's been a really interesting time. And Adele's interview on that podcast was so intriguing. I had to get her on my show. We had such a great time, you guys. I was really transparent, really honest, really authentic. I wanted to share truly what's been going on with me and my brain so that maybe some of you wouldn't feel so alone. This is a trying time in a woman's life, and it doesn't have to be, and it doesn't have to be lonely. And the more that I've talked about it with friends and colleagues, the more they've come out and shared with me and talked about it as well. We maybe all were managing quite beautifully until middle age hit and the hormones started to shift in perimenopause and menopause. So without further ado, Adele Winslett, let's jump in. Adele, welcome to the Dr. Tyna Show. I'm so excited to have you here. This is a long time coming. I was supposed to get you on years ago. And so thank you for finally making the time today.
No, it's perfect timing. It's a great opportunity and time to talk about it with everything that's been happening. So glad to be here.
Awesome. Well, tell the audience about you. I'll first share. I found you on Nicole Jardim's podcast and was just blown away with what you were laying down. And it was really resonating with me personally and also just with family members in my life. And so share who you are, what you do, and what we're going to be getting into today.
Yeah, so I'm a women's health practitioner, which doesn't really tell you much about what I do, but I help through the guidance and mentorship that I was blessed to have with Nicole Jardim, started working on supporting women with fixing their periods, addressing their hormonal imbalances. But within that, I got a diagnosis of ADHD, which I'd always kind of known, and I pushed back and said, oh, I don't need this. But actually it became the most validating experience of my life, unexpectedly. So of course, my go-to was to find the research and the science. Well, how are my hormones affecting this? You know, what impact is having? And I was so angry about the fact I couldn't find anything. I made it my mission to create a space for neurodivergent women to learn and understand the impact their hormones have on their traits. So I work with all women, but my specialism within that is looking at hormones and ADHD.
Perfect, which is right up my wheelhouse because I am somebody who has always, when I was a kid, they diagnosed me as hyperkinetic. That's how long ago that was. So I was a hyperkinetic kid. I was told to avoid all white foods like cookies, crackers. You just basically process carbohydrates and to make sure that my mom kept me active, like make sure she exercises and gets outside. And that was great. And it turned south on me when I moved to Oregon and into the dreary, rainy weather where I couldn't be outside all the time and I couldn't be active. And it really came to a head as depression. But I was always like a very high level, high functioning, gifted and talented programs in school. Yeah. I was that girl. No matter how punk rock I was still showing up in all the advanced placement classes and kicking everyone's ass. And so no one really knew what to do with me or how to help me. And for me, it manifested as a ton of anger and anxiety as a young woman. And then as I got older, I was like, oh, I have ADHD and it's a superpower, right? Like as long as you can harness it, I could do 10 things at once. I've always been extremely successful. No matter what I embark on, I'm really good at it. I procrastinate till the 11th hour, then just crush it, And I've existed on that cortisol loop for so long. And then perimenopause hit. And it was like a Led Zeppelin on fire, just and that's about the time I found your interview with Nicole. And I was like, oh, this is happening. Let's talk about perimenopause a little bit. I'm like, what's going on there? Why did my brain decide to glitch on me?
Oh, this is just something that I'm so passionate about because I've actually just completed a 3-month study. All of my back, I'm not a biochemist. I was doing this for my curiosity to understand the clinical needs of my community better. And this really threw up so many hypotheses for me to say, well, what's going on here? Why is the perimenopause a season where so many women are now getting diagnosed? It really seems to be a time where, like you've explained so beautifully, we've spent our life masking, we've had the help of all our beautiful estrogen and progesterone, all our strategies are working, we're like spinning all the plates, and then perimenopause hits, and we're like, what fresh hell is this? What is going on here? All my strategies that I had aren't working. Well, why? It's not just because we're accessing more information, there's more diagnosis. Something is happening, and we know there is a hormonal shift. So I wanted to understand what this was, right? So what came to me is when we're looking at women in those earlier phases, those earlier years of perimenopause, so like late 30s, early 40s, and I tend to see ADHD women going through this younger than neurotypical women. And what's happening here? Progesterone is dropping off, right? So when we look at progesterone as being this magical molecule, which I know is so triggering for women who feel like, I hate progesterone, I'm feeling intolerant to it. Actually, I think it's something else that's going on. Progesterone is a mood stabilizer. Progesterone regulates the nervous system, right? It does so much more than just protects the lining of our uterus. It plays this huge role in supporting our emotional and mental health, how well we're sleeping. It plays this big role, and because it's sensitizing the GABA receptors that help to calm us down. So surely it makes absolute sense that as we shift into this season where we're becoming progesterone deficient and our adrenals are so tired as a generation of women, they're not kicking in to produce the progesterone that our foremothers had the privilege of, and we're just crash landing into this season. So also, as we know, the estrogen is usually still at a pretty good level at this point, right? It's the progesterone that is coming down. So we then step into what we look at as this estrogen dominant pattern, not because we're producing too much, but because that progesterone just isn't there in sufficient ratios to help counterbalance the effect that estrogen can have on mood. Right? So we've not got the supportive benefits of the progesterone. We've got the impact of the estrogen dominating. And then this is where it starts to get really interesting to me, is as I was going through the study, I started to notice this pattern of histamine type symptoms in all of the women that I was working with. And we need so much more research on this, but we in the community are becoming more and more aware of this link with histamine and ADHD people, right? We don't know what to do with the receptors in the brain, but there is this definite link. So if I add another layer to this, so when we become estrogen dominant and we're losing that antihistamine type effect of the progesterone, and this estrogen is feeding this histamine is so much more than hives and sneezy noses, right? It has a massive impact on inflammation and mood. Okay, so I'm like, okay, this is another layer that we're stepping into. If we've got this bubbling histamine issue all our lives, and that protection of the progesterone goes, and we're just looking at estrogen, it would make perfect sense that the histamine then steps up a notch and potentially plays a role. So this was really interesting to me. And something else that I also thought that came through was the women that had happened to have testing done on their liver methylation pathways, so how their body was processing the estrogen, also came up. Now, my study didn't have the capacity to then test all of those women. I'd have loved to. And there's actually a test there's a study going on in the Netherlands about this at the minute. But looking at how our body is processing these estrogens could just add further fuel to the fire. So to me, it was like perimenopause created this perfect storm of everything flaring up. So no wonder we literally feel like the lid has come off. So that's a bit of a whistle-stop tour of what I believe is happening and contributing to ADHD women really struggling during this time.
Yeah, 1,000%. I'm going to share an example so that we can just solidify this. So
yeah,
first, I want to say estrogen dominance doesn't always necessarily mean high estrogen. It just means higher estrogen in relationship to your progesterone levels. Yep. And so I am a low hormone girl. I run low hormone. I've always been very lean. I feel good low hormone throughout my life when I've needed a little estrogen because I was so bottomed out from stress that I'd have a little, even in my 30s and 40s, I'd have a little breakthrough bleeding. I've been on progesterone since my 30s. Everybody, just full disclosure. Yep. I didn't go on the oral form until more recently, but I've always been using progesterone. And in my clinical practice, almost every woman who walks through my door gets a progesterone topical because they're all low. And like, that's been the way it is for decades. We weren't scared off 20 some years ago by the Women's Health Initiative. Like docs like Dr. Carrie Jones and I have been handing out prescriptions for HRT this whole time. You know, we were like, that was a bad study. It was badly interpreted. So anyway, I don't do well with high levels of hormones. And then I have the MTHFR mutation. I have 2 copies. I've got one of each. So luckily, I don't methylate well. And you take someone like that, you give them estrogen. So my estrogen started bottoming out, I don't know, a year and a half ago. Manifested as really horrific pain. Started adding in last fall a little bit of an estrogen patch, just a little bit, just to get that steady state, because even topical estrogen wasn't cutting it anymore. I was just too mamsy-pamsy about when I put it on. So I go on a steady state patch. It's like the clouds part, the sky opens, the calm salve of estrogen comes over my brain. And I'm like, oh, thank God. My pain goes down significantly. Everything's great. All of a sudden, a few months in, I start having panic attacks, like literal consuming panic attacks. And I'm like, what is going on? I run my estrogen labs. Everything's fine. It's low even. My FSH is still high, meaning my brain isn't hearing the estrogen and still thinks I'm in perimenopause. And menopause if you want to get real specific. And I'm sitting there like, what the heck? So I keep upping my estrogen and I keep on labs, everything looks fine. Every single person I showed my labs to is like, this looks fine. Well, what's happening is my receptors are not cleaned up and they're having a terrible struggle. My liver's having a terrible struggle because of those methylation pathways you just discussed. My histamine is going sky high and I am having all the symptomology of estrogen dominance, and yet labs look perfectly normal. And so I get off the estrogen patch. I clear it out of my system. I go back on a tiny little dose. Everything's fine. This is a perfect example of how labs are bullshit in perimenopause. Yes. We have to go with symptoms, right? And I'm just not processing the estrogen. And in fact, my lipids start going up. My thyroid antibodies start going up because I'm driving inflammation due to the excess estrogen in my body that isn't being processed and going down the pathways appropriately. Like in a nutshell, I hope that's understandable to the audience. It's like, even though the lab said everything was fine, I was not fine. That's the most perfect example you could have shared to highlight this. And you think that is you with all the knowledge you have, all the access to testing, your incredible experience and understanding of hormones. And it's still like, what's going on? You know, I know certainly in the UK, we have this kind of like conveyor belt, come and get your HRT, we'll slap this patch on you, off you go. Okay. You imagine how many women are going, this is meant to help me and I feel horrific. And no one is making these connections. They're being exacerbated. They're feeding this inner narrative that so many neurodivergent women tend to have already, is that they're not good enough. There's something wrong. We gaslight ourselves. We think we're too much. We're too over the top. We're too dramatic, all these things. And so we sit with this stuff and think there's something wrong with us. And it's just no one's informed enough to say, right, you're a neurodivergent woman. If you're someone who chooses to go down the route of HRT, what considerations do we need to take into because you have ADHD? We know you're more likely to have this histamine reaction and methylation issue in relation to estrogen. Our current practice here is when a woman's on HRT and they don't feel good, what do they say? Up your estrogen. Yeah. It drives me nuts. We've got women on dangerously high levels of estrogen and they don't need estrogen. They're not methylating it. They're flaring up these histamine things. They're getting awful periods and moods. And we're just going, just up your estrogen. It's crazy to me. Yep. This system that we're operating in. So that was a perfect example. Thank you for sharing that. Well, even in the functional medicine space, I have access to some of the best brains in the space. And I'm throwing my labs around like, hey, what do you think? What do you think? What do you think? Because I don't want to practice on myself in a silo. Like you're your own worst doctor, right? So I'm making sure to cross my T's and dot my I's. And I'm like, what do you think? What do you think? What do you think? And they're all like, up your progesterone, up your estrogen, up your progesterone, up your estrogen. And I'm like, no, I think I'm overdosing, you guys. Oh no, your labs look fine. I'm like, no, I feel like I'm overdosing. And you know what it feels? Right. It feels like postpartum. It feels like the psychosis that I got I went crazy in postpartum. And I think it was very much to do with this histamine issue. But I really had I was feeling that kind of out of control. I can't, it's akin to, I hate to use the word Karen, but I was turning into a full bore Karen, where you're pissy, you're anxious, you want to yell at your team all the time. Nothing is right. And then I knew something was wrong when my husband cut up the chicken and seasoned it wrong. He did not follow my instructions. And I lost my mind in the kitchen, and I yelled at him for 20 minutes because the chicken was not, I had a plan for the chicken dish and it did not involve the freaking paprika and cayenne pepper. And I was so mad. I was so mad. And I knew I was being completely irrational in real time as it's happening. And yet I still can't put a stopper in my mouth, and he's looking at me with these wide eyes and he starts laughing and I start laughing and I punch him in the arm, like not hard, just to like break the ice. And I was like, damn it, I'm so mad. He's like, yeah, I don't know why. And I was like, something is wrong. I think the hormones are off, but and if you're not getting the histamine symptoms, like the hives. And for me, it's the hives and the itchy and the prickly, sort of like a prickly heat rash all over my skin. I get bumpy everywhere, little tiny bumps. And I feel crazy because histamine's doing terrible things in our brain.
Yeah. And, there's so many things to speak to there. This postnatal time is a massively vulnerable time for ADHD women. We know the Journal of Psychiatry in 2021 did a study that showed we're much more risk of PMDD. We're much more risk of postnatal depression. We have a greater risk of having a harder perimenopause. This stuff isn't in our head. And quite often when I see women, they're like, I'm just the most awful person to my husband. I'm the worst mum in the world. I find myself behaving in a way that I would hate myself, and then that judgment comes in and they're like mortified at what they've done because we're forgetting that these are the most powerful biochemicals in the body and your brain's covered in receptors for them. How can we expect the brain? We're already pushing up a rock, up a mountain. We've spent decades in this burnout boom cycle, overworking to overcompensate for the perception that we've seen. Like when you were talking about your experience growing up and being a high achiever, I was the same. I was in Mensa as a kid. My IQ was through the roof, and this expectation on me to achieve academically, I got a massive dopamine hit from it. Yep. I wasn't a naughty girl. I was a good girl, until the lid came off in my teenage years. And then, that all went a bit wrong. But these are really powerful points for us. We get missed. These things get missed in us because we've masked our way through. We pick up, our nervous systems are so sensitive. And I believe our hormone systems are as well. And our nervous systems are so sensitive that we walk in a room and we've picked up who likes us, who doesn't like us, what the energy is. We are on all the time, right? Which is a blessing and a curse. But the impact on our adrenals is huge, particularly if we've got rejection sensitivity dysphoria running alongside this terrifying fear of getting something wrong. Our adrenals are just go, 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 go. So no wonder we have a harder perimenopause because there's nothing in the tank to kind of keep these estrogen and progesterone production going for us so we don't crash. Yeah. It's hard. So when we step into this season, then it's like, we need to make sure we're getting really good sleep. If you're not sleeping, that's the worst advice you ever want to hear, isn't it? It's like, I know I want to sleep, and being able to have the bandwidth to put in the practices that we know we should be doing. I've never met an ADHD woman who doesn't know how to eat well and how to look after herself, but it's just too much. We don't have these hormones here to help us go, right, this is how I need to increase my capacity, my mental capacity right now, so I can actually do the stuff I know I should be doing for myself. So we go into this paralysis. It's like the overwhelm of thinking about everything that we need to do, and then it just paralyzes us. So you sit and eat the slices of cheese on the kitchen floor, just like, I don't know what to do now.
Add some salami in there and some gluten-free crackers. And that was my meal for my dinner for 20 years. Yeah, I get it. It's crazy. It's really, for me, just to put it all together, and I've not been formally diagnosed with anything in adulthood, but as I research this more and more, because there's a component of this, which is the hypermobility syndrome, the connection with Ehlers-Danlos and hypermobility, which is my wheelhouse clinically, was what I dealt with a lot in practice because I did regenerative injection therapies for decades in clinical practice. And I'd see so many, particularly women, coming in with this hypermobility syndrome, and they had a massive disconnect from their body in many cases. And that's that's a slight autistic trait right there, is that disconnect from physical. And so all of us are very high functioning, high masking, all of it. It's to me, I don't think any of these really exist in a silo anymore. I think we can safely say that this ADHD, hypermobility syndrome, which leads to POTS and adrenal issues and that's a whole other topic, but put them together in this triad with this sort of like propensity towards being on the spectrum, which I do not deny. I'm ever so, and it's pretty obvious. And as I get older, we were talking offline, like you just quit caring to mask, like you quit. And so my followers are constantly saying, like, I'm so grateful for how blunt you are. And I'm thinking, man, I am sugarcoating the crap out of this. Like I constructed this dialogue for this reel. I put it through ChatGPT and asked it to soften it. Like, I'm so careful with the words I choose to say. And then it comes out online and people are like, you're so blunt. And then in social situations, I find myself saying the inside voice a lot outside, and it's worsening as I get older, and I just don't give an F. I just don't care. I'm like, I don't care. Cause like you said, if we don't want to be in that room anyway, like who cares? If I don't want to be there, if I'm not, and I'm getting to that point where I will just decline invitations for all kinds of important things. Cause I'm like, I don't want to do it. And my husband gets miffy. He's like, why don't you want to do it? This will be good for your career. And I'm like, I don't want to. I'm too old to want to do anything anymore that I don't want to do.
And that's what I love about this season. With so many women who get diagnosed, or whether it's self-diagnosed or whether it's done with a practitioner, for lots of women, there's this grief of going, oh my God, if only I had known this earlier, looking back how things could have been. I personally didn't have that. I was like, oh, thank goodness, there's nothing wrong with me. I remember going through the diagnosis and I was like, if he tells me I don't have it, I literally don't know what is going on with me. But this season of our life in perimenopause, the BS filter is off, and it's a beautiful time to get rid of the masks, right? We're surrendering, releasing what no longer serves us, and to step into the truth of who we are and the empowerment that can come with that. And as I said to you before we started recording, I don't want to be in spaces where I can't be myself. If I have to mask and put this smile on my face when my face hurts, I don't want to go. I don't want to be there, and that is so empowering and liberating when, without even realizing it, we've spent so many years trying to know what is expected of us so that we're not socially excluded. Okay, that's so important to our nervous systems as little girls, right? Be accepted, be included. That's how you survive. And to go through that reconditioning of going, actually, I don't need to do that. I don't need to do that. That's liberating to me. That's liberating and it's empowering. And you find your people.
That was my favorite part about COVID was I very early on pushed back against the narrative, and I had all kinds of so-called friends come at me and try to course correct me. And the profession at large was trying to course correct me because they were like, Dr. Tyna has a big platform and she's one of us and she's saying the things we don't want her to say, because they were all singing the song and drinking the Kool-Aid. And it was so interesting. The reaction I had was, oh, I never liked this person anyway. And COVID gave me this really grand opportunity. And I think a lot of us, a grand opportunity to be like, oh, I don't need you in my life. I don't like you.
Bye-bye.
You want to attack me or whatever? That's fine. Cause I actually, I had all these epiphanies of like, oh, I never even really liked her. I was just tolerating her because she was in my professional circle or she was in my professional network. And in some cases, clients and, people I'd worked more intimately with. And I was like, oh, I don't even like them. And it was so great. And now that it's all over and we're stepping out into the world, if I see them in social situations, I just don't give an F. I don't care. I just don't act like they, I mean, I might smile and nod, but like it's an agreement. We don't like each other.
Yeah.
And it's so liberating. And I don't
Yeah.
think that's just aging, although it is a large part of aging and it's beautiful. But I think it's also partially what we're talking about here, just that
Absolutely.
like I put up with it for so long because I was worried about the consequences of someone not liking me. And then all of a sudden you realize like, oh, I don't even like them. So who cares?
Okay. It's that, how many times have we abandoned our own needs? That's so big for me in this season of my life. I refuse to abandon my own needs to make someone else feel comfortable. I don't have an intention to make anyone feel uncomfortable. But if my messaging or what I'm saying is triggering to you, I'm not responsible for that. I'm not responsible for how you receive the information that I'm sharing. And talking about the pandemic and everything, it taught me, if there's a zombie apocalypse, I know who I want on my team.
Exactly.
It's like, where are my people? And if people weren't out talking and speaking their truths around that, you'd never have had that sense of solidarity and community and shared beliefs that came from that time. It was powerful.
It was a great purge and a wonderful unity bringer. And also, like you said, zombie apocalypse, you know who you don't want on the team and who's clearly not invited, right? And it makes it real easy. And I think that's part of, I always joke, my mom and I are both Aquarius, but my mom also, whether she knows it or not, shares the same brain that I have here with all of these things. And as she gets older, though, I think the problem is we can become much more reclusive as we get older, right? Because we don't mind cutting people off. And again, we joke that it's an Aquarian thing, but I think it's a this thing. And I think it's this slightly on the spectrum, ADHD, like this whole, walking into older age. I think it's a very normal part of aging for women when they hit 40, especially 50. We're like, we don't care so much about who likes us or not. And it's a powerful time. The hormonal shifts are powerful, but I don't ever want, because it can get very comfortable to be alone. And you're good that way, and it's not such a good thing.
It's not. And this is interesting, particularly the women I work with who are closer to actual menopause. This is a theme. And I love that you've touched on this because there isn't the capacity to mask, the social stimulation, that social battery that has never been fully charged really for us, unless it's been self-medicating in some way. It's actually, when we get into that season of our life, it's much more pleasurable on so many levels to just not be in the spaces where that sensory stimulation is happening. But exactly as you've said, it can be very isolating. And we know loneliness is one of the biggest killers, right? So we have to be really careful not to allow ourselves to shut down. Because I'm definitely one of those people. I could come in, shut the doors, close the curtains, and I'm done for the weekend. It is that and I could feel that coming in more and more the older I'm getting. So I think it's a really important point.
Yeah, loneliness is not good for your immune system. No. It's not good for your cognition. It's not good for longevity. We got to be around other people, whether we like it or not.
Yeah, exactly. Find the people you could be fully yourself around, I think, is the clue there.
Well, I just say, let your freak flag fly and find other people whose freak flags are fun with yours. They don't have to match, but like find the other quirky folks in the group and embrace that. You mentioned medication. Can we talk about medication here for a minute? This is something I have admittedly been vehemently against because really Adderall is not that far off from methamphetamines. And so I've been hesitant to allow it in my daughter's life. And I've been hesitant to consider it for myself. And I am starting to reconsider what that might be like or what a trial of that might be like, because I've seen in adult women, particularly in patients of mine who were diagnosed by someone else and given appropriate medication, whether it's modafinil or Adderall or Ritalin, they had profound turnarounds and a real freedom. And it was almost like they got out of prison. Like they felt like the way they described it was like their minds and their bodies and their souls had gotten out of prison and they could just function without hyper ruminating about 10 million things all at once, all the time. So I just wanted to hear your thoughts or experiences or your clients.
Yeah, so this is a really interesting one, and something probably one of my most asked questions from women who come to work with me is, what do you think about medication? And for me, I think it's a really personal journey. I think the kind of backstory is we have to acknowledge the gender bias in the research and understanding around ADHD across most most of our understanding around health, but it's really stark in ADHD because mostly everything we know about ADHD diagnosis, assessment, support, intervention, treatment is based on a male physiology. So we have all of these medications that have evolved being tested on males. So we bring in this massive, effectively, influx of women with a fluctuating, cyclical, different endocrine system, and we see a different effect of the medication. So I would say, very roughly in my community, of women who choose medication, it either changes their lives or it's an absolute nightmare trying to get it right, and they just end up giving up on it because it'll be like, oh, it kind of does this a bit, and then it will work at certain times in the cycle because estrogen sensitizes it, or it won't work at other times because progesterone stops it working. So I would say in the last 18 months, there's much more of an acknowledgement of this of prescribers, but they don't know what to do about it. So what they're doing is like, well, we'll add a little bit in here in your luteal phase, we'll up your dose, we'll try an SSRI as well. There's kind of this practice on women of trying to optimize medication when the hormones are having more of a powerful effect on the effectiveness of those meds. So it's really hit and miss is what I tend to see. It can change women's lives, or it can be quite a dance to try and get it right.
Yeah, that's what I'm seeing. I'm seeing some women almost get hooked on it. You know, as their prescription's running low, they completely freak out. And then I've seen other women say, oh, I can use it as needed, especially a medication like modafinil. I can use it as needed. Yeah. And it really brings a lot of clarity when I need to sit down and focus with my team or do at work on a project or get something done. And because the inability to complete tasks and to multitask as we hit this age and as our estrogen, the work by Lisa Mosconi showed the brains of women as they go through perimenopause, and it's just absolute hell. Like, our receptors are screaming for estrogen and looking for estrogen. Our estrogen's waning. And she's even linking it now to, down the line to outcomes with Alzheimer's, which I'm so excited the work she's doing. But to know that your brain, and all of our brains are very different. For me, my brain doesn't like a lot of estrogen, but man, when it's too low, I'm a train wreck, and it's anxiety on either side, right? It's crippling anxiety and the inability to get anything done on either side. Put a little estrogen in the picture, and I'm like, I'm cool as a cucumber, and I am on task. And so, and this also changes, though. I think something that goes back to what we were saying in the beginning, women need to appreciate your needs for hormones are going to change seasonally. They're going to change based on your toxicity or your stress level. They're going to change based on your fitness level and how often you're getting to the gym or not, how much you're hitting the sauna, all of these factors, how much alcohol you're drinking, how much you're sleeping. Your needs are going to change. And so being able to work with a practitioner who's respectful of that and who's willing to sort of weave and dodge with you in real time. And I think that the same could be said about the ADHD and the ADD medications, is like, there might be seasons for it, or there might be times of the week for it. But getting on something like that full time, I think getting on anything full time can be a little bit, not, I don't want to say dangerous. I just think getting too reliant on any one medication 24/7 doesn't always go well long term.
I think something for me as well, because obviously my bias is always going to be, let's deal with your hormones and see what you're left with. Because what I don't want to see in my women is that they're trying to use an ADHD medication to deal with a hormone imbalance, and vice versa. And that for me is where let's get the hormones right and then see what you're left with. So you're trying to really deal with the ADHD with ADHD medication, rather than going, oh, actually, is this progesterone deficiency, or is this happening here? So it's when women try and do it all at once, I don't suggest that. And obviously my bias is going to be, let's sort your hormones and see what you're left with. Because they might find that some body identical HRT, particularly with something like progesterone, that exactly as you said, you can take a really empowered approach. It's not this baseline dosing. It's like, actually, I'm noticing that X, Y, and Z is happening now. I need some more of this. I can use some cream until I'm starting to feel a bit better. That for me is really empowered to be able to do that. And also the meds are really good at masking a lot of the symptoms of hormone imbalance. So if there's something going on with blood sugar regulation, for example, the meds are really good at disguising the ups and the downs of the crashes with the energy, with the cravings, this kind of thing, and the appetite. So that we know we're much more prone to type 2 diabetes. So if the meds are disguising what is happening inside that, that's still happening. You're just not connecting with it and feeling it. So that for me, through that lens, is I want women to take that into consideration before making those choices.
I totally agree. And what you got to get everything dialed in. Is everything dialed in? Are all the things dialed in, doing the best we can? Although I will say sometimes, and this is where I'm a fan of substances like GLP-1s. I don't know if you've actually, have you been paying attention to your clients who are utilizing GLP-1s and how it's impacting their brain? Because I'm seeing tremendous improvements.
So I actually think you've probably got much more experience. It's only just coming over here. I would say it's kind of blown up in the last couple of months. So I haven't had the range to see it, but I'm excited for it. I'm excited to see it. The only thing that makes me feel apprehensive is this kind of approach that we seem to have very conventionally here of like everyone just gets the same dose of everything and like off you go. This like not tailoring things to individual need. But I mean, even yesterday, actually, you said it, one of my women in clinic, who's the first woman I've had is coming, she's like, I feel amazing.
Yeah.
I'm like, this is really interesting because from my understanding of it, it's switching up the metabolism, right? And really helping on a whole system level. So that's really interesting to me to see where that goes.
Well, it brings down neuroinflammation. It induces neuroplasticity. So it opens a window of opportunity for these folks who are utilizing it to actually make really appreciable changes in their lifestyle that will stick because it's giving them an opportunity to have some neuroplasticity. They could also rewire their brain during that neuroplasticity into even further bad habits. But it tends to make people, it plays on dopaminergic and serotonergic pathways, and it makes people not want the noise. They don't chase the dopamine dragon. So whether it's food or sex or gambling or shopping or any of the things they're doing to chase their dopamine dragon, it turns that way down. And so we're seeing smoking cessation, alcohol cessation, opioid cessation. And it's not 100%. You can chew right through it. You can override it. But I think that, and you can actually take enough that you get sort of into that ahidynia place where you're like, it's the blahs, they don't care. So there's definitely something about tailoring a dose and making it very personalized. But that said, I think it's an exciting opportunity to look at sort of what's driving the noise in the brain. And for me, like I'm a stress addict. I will chase cortisol. I will chase. And we even have data on this, that when children are in utero and they're in a stressed out mother's womb, they can actually start to have cortisol resistance in the brain. So they'll come out needing stress just to feel normal. And I think that probably happened to me. So I will chase it. And when I utilize really tiny doses of GLP-1s, not for weight loss, just for the neuroinflammatory benefits, and just the neuroregenerative benefits, it calms that noise down, and I don't feel like chasing stress. I don't feel like I don't overpack. That's another thing I do. I tend to ruminate and over worry about what's coming. Yeah. And so I don't have that happen to me when I'm utilizing GLP-1s, and it's really profound. And I've seen with some neurodivergent folks who are just mildly on the spectrum have a real improvement in their overall ability to focus and pay attention. Their ADHD symptoms improve. So I'll be interested to see. You'll have to report back in 6 months or a year.
Absolutely. And it's something, it's natural, right? If we're talking about body identical hormones, we're looking at these things that are coming into the market. Like why, if there's something that can be brought in that's going to improve something with a more natural kind of focus for me, then like, as you said, some of the medications, they're really strong. Should women use them? I'd never say yes or no, if it's something that improves their quality of life. But for me, I'm always want to go down a route and say, okay, but what else is there that my body's going to maybe want to work with? So I think it's a really interesting area to watch.
Well, it's made in our bodies. It's endogenously produced. And so my argument has always been maybe folks are having a bit of a functional deficiency of GLP-1. Like where is this functional deficiency coming from? Not that everybody needs a huge big dose or even tolerates the standard dosing, but that sometimes just sprinkling a little bit of these endogenously produced signaling peptide hormones, like it's in the same orchestra as leptin and ghrelin and insulin. So I just think there's something there. I really do. I think there's something profoundly happening for those who particularly have that ADHD brain. And the feedback I'm getting from my followers and from my clients and patients when they tell me, like, it just quiets everything down and I don't feel the crazy noise of everything anymore. I'm not hearing everything. I'm not worried about everything. I don't have to throw my monkeys into every fight. There's just the rumination winds way down. It's interesting.
I think the noise is one of the biggest things, to describe. And someone says, this narrative of, oh, well, everyone's got a bit of ADHD. That is so jarring to hear when you actually have it and you have to manage the noise in your head. Like you say, we're on sensory perception where we are hearing everything, analyzing, feeling, seeing everything around us, not consciously, we're just doing it. And I say it's like having 1,000 TV screens in your head that are all speaking a different language while there's a theme tune playing in the background and you're consciously trying to focus on something and do something else. It's a lot, and that's our norm. And I think when we then start hitting these phases, different life phases and different parts of the cycle where the hormones are switching up and changing, no wonder that gets louder and out of control. What we've become used to, probably a neurotypical person couldn't cope with. I do think I would love one day a neurotypical person to come inside my head. I think they'd just be like, what is this? What's going on? Like, oh, that was a calm day,
Well, I liken it to when folks who really do have the disease of obesity and they are just constantly consumed with thoughts of food and eating and hunger, they externally eat. And I always told people, I internally eat. I eat myself up. I just sit there and destroy myself over every little thing that came out of my mouth. And did I do that right? Did I say that right? Can you imagine being where I am and having an online platform and the massive amount of content that I produce all the time? It's a 24/7 hyper surveillance of everything I said going through my head. Did I say that? And just having to let it go, just being like, well, it's out in the world now and the internet's forever. So it's really interesting. And when I heard, I think it was Oprah who was describing her experience just going back to GLP-1s. She said the food noise turned off and she's like, oh, this is how normal people must feel, not hyper fixated on food all the time. And for me, when I utilize a little bit of a GLP-1, I'm not hyper fixated on all the stuff, on just all the stuff, right? All the hyper thinking and all the rumination and even I don't know if you get this, but I've known a lot of ADHD folks. They can't sleep, and it's not even because they can't sleep. It's because they can't turn their brain off at night. There's 10 million things going through their head, and their whole day has to go through preview again. Like, did I say this right? Did I do this right? Did I open this door right? And this hyperfixation. And it's interesting, a tool that I have that I share with my patients is I will actually, if it's getting really bad enough that I can't go to sleep, I will get up and write down every single thing that I am hyperfixated on. And I tell myself I will deal with this in the morning. And interestingly, when I look at it in the morning, none of it's a big deal.
No.
But at 10 o'clock at night, it was a huge deal.
And our brain can't switch off from it, right? It's going to be in that hyper loop of that hyper thought the whole time, probably with one line of a song that we picked up somewhere in the day, playing over and over and over. And we'll, with RSD and this kind of like rumination, we can remember something we did 10 years ago and still have that visceral like, oh no, I can't believe I did that feeling, and that likes to pop in as well. And that is a great technique. And I talk to women about that as well. Just get up, turn the light on, write it down, because in your brain, I think part of the reason we get stuck in a loop is because we've learned we're going to forget it.
Yes.
And this is where I think some of the distraction comes in as well. Like I will think, oh, I need to go and have a shower. But on the way, I will see that the washing basket needs emptying. And I will find myself quite often in the kitchen, unloading the dishwasher naked, thinking, why am I not in the shower? Because it's like we're worried we're going to forget to do the thing if we don't do it instantly. So it's like following the crumbs on a Hansel and Gretel trail, where it just leads us into this, how have I got here? Because it's like if we don't do it straight away, it will drop out. So writing, these things down, put it down the brain and go, oh, it's okay. I'm not going to forget that because it's written down and it's there. It's been processed.
Yep. And the brain can relax. Another trick I just learned, which actually worked quite well for me recently when I couldn't fall asleep because I was ruminating, was you take a word that you're familiar with, like the example they gave was piano, and you start with the first letter P, and you start going through every single word you know that starts with a P for maybe 10 seconds. And then you go to I, and then you go through every word you know that starts with I, and on, and so forth. And by the time I got to O, I was like, this is not freaking working. And I start going through all of the words I could think of that start with O, and I was immediately asleep. So just something, I forgot how they termed it, but it was basically you're kind of toggling the brain. You're mind switching. You're switching up what the brain's doing instead of you're allowing it to use the fact that it's on and it's feeling like it needs to be on and it needs to be hypervigilant, but you're rerouting it into a different behavior. And I thought that was really interesting. So something for the listeners to try if you are, but I do like the note idea because you're right. And guess what? When you're in perimenopause, you will forget it. You could be in the shower having the most brilliant idea in the world. And by the time I get out of the shower to write it down, it's gone.
It has, and it's instant. It has got into where you think, what was I just thinking about? It was really important, and it's gone.
It's gone. I figure I give myself grace, and I think if it's important enough, it'll come back. But another great thing I do is I have all of my creative brilliance when I'm in water. So if I'm in the tub or I'm in the shower, and stick a whiteboard in your shower. With a pen.
Notepads.
Yeah, just put a whiteboard somewhere where the water's not actually going to rinse it off. And then you can remember everything you need to remember, because as you're shampooing your hair and that brilliant thought comes in, you can just write it down.
And I think this is one of the things I speak to my women about, is that we need to get rid of these shoulds. And again, perimenopause is a great time to do this, of surrendering these outdated beliefs that no longer serve us. We have to accept that we probably have homes that don't look like normal, like they should on Pinterest, right? My family members have got houses that look like high-end John Lewis show homes, right? Everything's perfect. My house can't look like that, because if it's not in my line of vision, it doesn't exist. Okay. So, and if the more steps there are involved in doing something, the less likely I am to do it. So I need my blender out ready to go. I need my food processor out ready to go. Otherwise, I'm never going to get it out of the cupboard, piece all the bits together and use it. But that means my kitchen service is full of all the things that I need to use. But that's how I need it. If you're taking supplements, every ADHD woman I know has the cupboard full of supplements, right? And they're there, and we're a marketer's dream. We're like, this is going to be the thing. I'm going to take it, and then I'm going to take it for 3 days, and I'm going to stick it in the cupboard. If it's not in our line of vision, it doesn't exist. Okay, so I'm like, you have it where you sit and eat. Have them out on the table. Have it in that line of vision. Otherwise, don't bother getting them, because consistency is not our friend generally. So don't waste it. It will become ADHD tax. If you're not going to get something and find a way that works for you, don't bother. Save your money.
I wish you could talk to my husband, because he is always like, why is the Instant Pot and the Ninja and everything on the counter? We have under counter space where we've made room specifically for that item, but yet you keep it on the counter. I'm like, because I'll forget to use it if I don't have it out. And the same thing, I have this whole elaborate supplement organization system underneath one cabinet underneath the counter, and yet on the island, and yet I have all of the ones I'm taking right out on top, because I'll forget to take them, and he doesn't understand the mess. And to me, there is no mess. I don't even see it. It's just So it's a thing. I really appreciate you saying that, because he has his own form of ADHD, which is a different form, but his is actually, I think he's onto something. He's a farmer. He spends all day outside, either tinkering around with mechanics, because he's a diesel mechanic. He can fix anything. He can build anything. He can make anything happen. And so he's outside all day in the elements, no matter rain or shine or cold. We're in Oregon. It's not that warm many months of the year. And yet, if he doesn't do that, he is a nightmare to be around. But if he does do that and he comes home super dirty, covered in grease and dirt and exhausted in the evening as the sun's waning, and he goes and takes a shower, happiest man. But without that, he really starts to eat himself. You start to go inside and internalize and get real grumpy. So different version.
But we know that exercise is as effective as medication. Yes. Right. So, my husband is the same. He's neurodivergent AF, right? But he's out there. He's very physical with his job, and he's moving his body. And that is his way of medicating and managing it for himself. There's a big difference. He doesn't know what to do with himself if he's not outside moving.
Yes, yes. And for me, it's the gym. But if it doesn't happen, I am batshit crazy and unpleasant to be around for everyone involved. And I start thinking up all of the things. Like I start you start worrying about things outside of your own onus of control and the world's problems and the global problems, and everything becomes a big deal. And that is so well managed with exercise, I found.
Absolutely. Yeah. And the right exercise for you, it doesn't have to be, there's no specific way. We have to do things. We're feel-good junkies. Okay. Our brain is looking for that next dopamine fix. I'm lucky for me, that's about health and wellness. Once I've got one thing in, I'm like, right, what's next? If that makes me feel that good, what's next? I want more. My husband's turning our teeny tiny garden into like this reset spa at the moment, where I've got the infrared sauna and the cold bath, and I'm so excited about it. It'd probably be other people's nightmare, but these are the things that keep me on track. I have to be really mindful about how I'm eating, how I'm regulating my blood sugar, how I'm optimizing my circadian rhythm. I have to do these things because otherwise my traits are out of control.
Well, and this is how we stay successful, because I do believe it gives you, to bring the positive back in, it gives me a massive competitive advantage. I am a tenacious terrier dog. I will dig up my bone, and if I have to go at it 8 different ways, I will dig up my bone. So I don't fail at anything. I just look at the non-successes as an opportunity to reroute and try something else. I don't ever just bag it. I'm like, well, that didn't work. What will? Let me try something else. Let me try something else. And I go at it 8 different ways. If I am not physically well, if I'm exhausted, if I'm underfed, if I'm not well nourished, if I'm not well slept, if I'm not well exercised, I am so off my mark. And everything suffers, including my relationships. So that is extra motivation for me to stay very, very healthy and to take very good care of myself, because I don't feel like I have the option to not. If I want the people, if I want the people around me to tolerate me, my promise to them, when I got into my relationship with my husband a few years ago, I was like, just to let you know, I'm a quirky one. Like I'm a weird girl. And he's like, that's okay. I'm a complete handful. And both of us were like, nah. And then we get a year in and we're like, well, yeah. But it is our promise to each other that we will take exceedingly good care of ourselves so that our weird shit doesn't manifest into negative shit. It's the good weird. It's not the bad weird. We don't want the bad weird spilling out all over each other and impacting each other negatively. And so that's our promise to ourselves and to our loved ones. I don't ever want to be a burden on anybody. And it's up to me to take the best care of myself that I can, so that I can not only be successful in the world, but I can serve my audience, I can serve my followers, I can serve God, I can be a purpose, but also the intimate relationships I have around me stay positive and healthy.
And that is so important. And this is one of the things that I love about neurodivergent women is we do not accept no as an answer. If someone says to us, oh, this is it, you've got to accept it. Well, no, that's not acceptable to me. There will be a way to resolve this. There will be a solution. I think that's why we're addicted to the supplements, because that might be the thing. But there's always this way. We don't give up. We're down the rabbit holes. What is the answer? And can you imagine what a massive contribution to the evolution of humanity our brains were? We were the out-of-the-box thinkers. We were the risk takers. We made quick, sharp decisions. We heard the stick break 2 miles away. We sniffed the food that wasn't safe to eat. We knew this stuff. The problem is we live in a world that is on steroids. So for a sensitive nervous system and a body that is much more sensitive, I think that's a lot. There's nothing wrong with us. We're just not designed to exist in this ecosystem the way that it is. I don't think anybody is. I think everyone's having a tough time, but you see people with a more sensitive nervous system and sensory perception, it's a lot.
I think that early on, I sorted that out and I realized that artificial lights really set me off. I never did well in school as a kid who had to sit still and sit under fluorescent lights. So getting outside as much as possible. Not a big fan of having the TV on in the background. I'm not a big fan of background noise. I do way better. I live now out on 40 acres. I know not everybody can move out to the country, but once I moved out to the country and I quit hearing all the noise around me and just feeling everybody's emotions, things got much better. So I'm not living on top of people literally in an apartment complex. For me, it's just about what can I control and how can I dampen the stimuli coming at me. And when I go out in public now and I have to be, I was just recently at even just a family event, there's a lot going on. There was like 8 dogs. I love dogs. So I was in total heaven, but there was 8 dogs barking and almost getting into a fight. There was a baby screaming. There was, there was all kinds of different people I knew, people I didn't know. And for the first hour, I was just sitting there like a deer in headlights because my nervous system, for whatever reason that day, was not handling it well. And then, I eased in and everything was fine. But just controlling the variables you can, opting out of the things that you don't want to do, that are going to overstimulate your nervous system, and not trying to force your way through. I think noise canceling headphones are wonderful. If you've got to go through an airport and you're feeling like you need to just go internal, having mantras or meditations. I even have little exercises I'll do with my tongue inside my mouth. I'll place my tongue up against the upper palate on the backside of the teeth, just a little bit, the end spot where you say nah, and I'll just focus there and breathe through my nose. Even that little thing will quiet my nervous system. Essential oils in my purse, maybe even I have little salt licks. I have these Redmond's Real Salt. They sell the rocks, the actual rock salt. So I'll have those. I might suck on some, little weird things that don't bring a lot of attention to me, but can just calm me down and bring me back to myself. And then I'm fine, and I'm good. And it sometimes just takes me a minute to ease into the social interaction.
And I think just understanding that this is the kind of brain that you have gives you the opportunity to offer yourself so much compassion and kindness. That was the biggest thing I got from understanding. I'm like, oh, that's why I do that. That's why I do that. And that's why I need to show up in this way. Not because there's anything wrong with me. It's just that this is what I need. And if you are in those situations where you're going from one sensory overload situation into another, buffer it. It might be that, especially around times like Christmas or things where your birthdays or whatever's going on and it's busier, just protect time either side. It's okay to say, I'm just going to go and lay upstairs by myself for an hour.
Yeah, absolutely.
And just have a lovely soft bedspread and just stare out the window. It's okay. We've been groomed by capitalist society that it's not okay to stop and rest. It's fundamental to everybody, but I think particularly for our kind of brains, we need that downtime. If that inner motor and that inner drive will let you. And downtime doesn't look for us like sitting in a corner silently meditating. Yes. It might be moving your body, right? It might be plunging yourself into a cold face, into your face into a cold basin. It might be these things that look extreme to other people, but for us, it's like, oh, okay. I'm back in my body. I'm regulating myself. It's so important.
I just go for a lot of walks, I loop around the house until I am back and do some breathing exercises. I think box breathing can be very helpful for some folks. There's tapping for folks. I'm just trying to think of tools I use. EFT. People go look it up. It's where you do a series of tapping to calm your nervous system down and come back to center. So, something my mom taught me when I was a kid that she found helped me was to go rinse my wrists under cold water, which is a similar reaction to what happens when you put your face in cold water, but a little less obvious, So I remember being in high school and starting to have a panic attack, and I would just excuse myself and go run my wrists under cold water in the bathroom and focus on my breathing, and I was fine. And I could go rejoin the group.
But look at all these things that just off the top of your head, you've listed off that you just did, right? So when I spoke to an ADHD psych, he said, think how much energy you use just showing up. And I'd never considered that because fatigue and low energy is something that comes with this. And when you start to understand what it takes for us to keep ourselves regulated, particularly if we're showing up in a public space or showing up for people, we have to be on. We can't show up in this messy ADHD kind of state. We've got to be on. So we have to invest a lot of energy in things that are just normal to us to do that neurotypical people aren't doing to get out the door, right? It takes a lot of energy to be us. And by the end of the day, my decision-making ability is out. Even when we were talking about the time to do the podcast, right? It's like, where can we do this where the time zones are going to fit and I can actually still string a sentence together, because that dopamine bucket is finished because of all the things we've had to consider to get through the day. Neurotypical people aren't doing this.
Yes.
They're just getting up and doing their thing.
This is a good point. You're right. That's why I put the onus of responsibility on you to find the time, because I immediately thought there's no way I'm going to be able to sit. Like the thought of sitting down and figuring out how to get you on a UK time, I was like, nope, I'm not doing it.
I can't. It's too much. It's too much. It's like scrambled egg for my brain. My brain tastes the scrambled egg. So I'm like, I literally, a time zone, it just sends me over the edge. And I'm like, I'm a clever woman. I am a clever woman.
And we have the internet.
Time zone?
we have Google. I know. That's probably why it didn't happen for the last 2 years. Because the thought it was too overwhelming for both of us to figure out our time zones. If it's not easy, I'm like, I'm not doing it.
It's a no.
That's funny. Well, I have been hyper accommodating in the past. I was such a people pleaser in my youth to the point that it made me ill. And so I tend not to be that anymore. And I try to I have very firm boundaries. So I'm not trying to talk about myself so much as I'm trying to explain through story, because as I've researched this and I've gone down the rabbit hole, I understand this is very typical of a lot of women in particular. And to reiterate, women with these brains function differently than men do with these types of brains. So it's a different beast. So we're really talking about women here. But when I discovered that I could implement a boundary and hold it, my whole life changed. And that was really, I got to be honest, that was really not until probably like my late 30s, early 40s, when I finally learned that to put a boundary down and not compromise around that boundary whatsoever. And it can look severe to some people because I am a little bit too firm sometimes, and I won't give wiggle room on certain things, because if it's a no, it's a no. And when people try to get around that no, I get even more aggravated and the no becomes firmer. And then the no becomes a little bitchy, because I don't like getting asked something 3 times in a row when I've already said no. And so I found in the world of business, especially in the online space and dealing with different brands and such, sometimes it can be, it's a bit of a negotiation. I'm good at that, but my boundaries are firm, and I have found so much more success in firm boundaries and just sheer belief in myself. I know what my talents are. I know what I'm good at. I know what I can deliver on when I make a promise. And I don't go beyond that. If I say I'm going to do something and it's going to be great, it will be great. But that said, those boundaries, and once I put those in, things got a lot better. A lot better. And I think it's something a lot of women in particular struggle with.
I think it is a huge topic for women. And perimenopause for me, one of the biggest gifts is boundaries, the invitation to step into boundaries. I'm called the queen of boundaries. I feel so like, no, this is my boundary around where I refuse to abandon my needs anymore in this. But there's so much to receive this message as a woman, because we are taught quite literally that to be a good girl, we have to make sure everyone else is comfortable over our own needs. Okay. A lot of us learned that to mother was to abandon our own needs and just be in service to everybody else. A lot of us, we had really toxic role models about what it meant to be good as a woman, and putting a boundary in made you a bitch.
Yep.
To say no. So it's really like, oh, I didn't want to be that. So I would rather just people please, so that no one sees beneath the masking and everyone thinks I'm really nice, and we don't talk about this difference between being nice and being kind. I'm a really kind person, but I wouldn't fit in the nice box probably because of having those kind of boundaries, and because of integrity means so much to me. I can't morph myself into something anymore as I did when I was younger, which I didn't realize I was doing. But that was what, that it wasn't conscious, but I was masking to survive. Like the thought of doing that now, it feels suffocating and so oppressive that it's just a no.
Yes, absolutely. I'm with you so much. We're taught to be accommodating, and there is a time and a place to be accommodating. And then at a certain point, it's just a no. And as I get older, I don't need to be as accommodating. I'm not trying to go along to get along anymore. And I'm not trying to be everybody's friend anymore. And I don't really care. I'm a very, very huge-hearted, generous human being. And at the same time, some people will say, you're such a bitch. And I'm like, yeah, I am. Like, push me to that. And I'm very good at that too.
Yeah.
Not a problem.
I think one of our superpowers, but it's also a curse, is we feel so deeply. Right, we can feel empathy it so deeply. We can absorb everybody else's emotions around us. We understand situations and feel it so deeply. But if we don't protect that in ourselves to a degree, there would be nothing left of us, you know. And I think a lot of ADHD women, when they first begin this journey, a common thing I hear is like, I don't even know who I am. I don't know what my boundaries are, what are my values, what are my experiences, because I've been so absorbed. I've been absorbing so many other people's and trying to survive. I don't actually know who I am. And again, this season of life, I think, provides this beautiful opportunity to explore that.
I love it. I love it. This has been so good and actually so helpful. It's very reassuring to hear you share so many similar experiences and feelings, because it's nice to know we're not alone. And that's why I wanted to have you on. And that's why I've been so transparent throughout this episode with my audience, is so that women understand that they're not alone either. These are just our quirks. They're beautiful gifts. And as long as we stay as healthy as possible and we take as good a care of ourselves as we can, I think they can be very powerful gifts and not so much a curse. But they can be a curse when things go sideways. And so knowing how to deal with that, and I think just step one is acknowledging there's a problem, or I shouldn't say a problem, but a difference, right? There's just something there. And there's wonderful ways to navigate that. So
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, where can everybody find you, Adele? Because your information has been so helpful.
So I'm Harmonize You with an S on Instagram or my website. I can just about get my head around that. Tech is not my friend. I can just about wing it on Instagram and a website, and then I'm done. So
good for you.
To hang out if you want to say hi.
I love it. I love it. And what's the website? It's harmonizeyou.com?
Harmonizeyou.co.uk.
Okay. I'll make sure that the links are in the show notes for everybody. Amazing. So they can come find you and come follow you and learn from you. It's been such a treat to have you on today. Thanks so much for coming on. Yeah. Thanks for coming on the Dr. Tyna Show. Thanks for listening to the Dr. Tyna Show. This is a Wellness Loud production produced by Drake Peterson and mixed by Mike Fry. Theme song is by John the Guilt. You can watch the full video version of this podcast inside the Spotify app or on YouTube. As always, you can email the podcast at podcast@drtyna.com. That's DRTYNA. And if you like this episode, please rate, review, and subscribe on your favorite podcast app. You can also find all of my offerings on my website at drtyna.com. For more shows by my team, go to wellnessloud.com. See you next time, and thanks for listening. This podcast is for general informational purposes only. It does not constitute the practices of medicine, nursing, or other professional healthcare services, including the giving of medical advice. I am a doctor, but I am not your doctor. No doctor-patient relationship is formed. The use of this information and the materials linked to this podcast is at the user's own risk. The content on this podcast is intended not to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Users should not disregard or delay in obtaining medical advice from any medical condition they have, and they should seek the assistance of their healthcare professionals for any such conditions.